Welcome to the Gentleman Project podcast. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore.
Today we have Chris Naugle on the program. Chris and I met about 5 years ago in San Diego. He was at a networking seminar. You just are attracted to people with this type of energy. He and his wife, Larissa, were both there. We ended up having some really great conversations, and our networks overlapped a little bit in the last 5 years. Now that we've started the podcast, Chris agreed to come on. Chris is a mogul. He's a celebrity. He's known as country's #1 money mentor. Chris has a core belief that success is built not by the resources that you have, but by how resourceful you are, and that can't be any more true than in parenting. He's had his own HGTV pilot show. He's been on House Hunter, featured in Forbes, ABC. He's the founder of the Money School, author of The Money Multiplier, The Money Mentor, teaching people about how money works. And we haven't touched on that with our kids, so we're excited to have Chris on the program today to talk about how we can teach our kids some of those things. And I'll let him come into it. When I met him, he didn't have any kids, and he does now, so I want to pick his brain on what he's learned. Welcome to the program, Chris.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on.
Tell us, a little bit about your family, about Larissa and your new child that's joined you in the last couple of years.
Yeah. So, me and Larissa have been together for quite a long time. She actually met me through her mother and at an auto repair shop of none other places. Her mother is a very persistent woman, is the only way to say it. And she just kept saying to me, "You have to meet my daughter. You have to meet my daughter." And I'm like, "Lori, I have a girlfriend. Please back off." But she didn't. And I ended up doing coffee just to shut her mother up. And that's where it all started. So a lot's happened. My gosh, we've been through a lot of roller coasters. I've been through 2 pretty much economic collapses. In that time, I've had a lot of money and lost it all, and then had it and lost it. And we've made it through all of that. And now we have a 14-month-old. So I was always the guy that said I was never going to have kids or really didn't know. And here I am. Now I've got the most amazing 14-month-old daughter, and wouldn't change it for the world.
Tell us a little bit about your background, Chris. We gave the bio entry, but tell us, how did you get into the finance world, and why?
Yeah, that's a great story. I'm just a normal guy. I grew up in a lower middle class family. Was raised by my mom. She's always been my unconditional one. My father was actually an alcoholic growing up, so he really wasn't very influential in, anything that I did entrepreneurial wise. He actually was the one that usually stood in my way saying, "That's stupid. Why are you doing this?" And, how I ended up getting where I'm at today really was dreaming. I'd be quite honest with you. When I wanted something, when, I got these big, crazy ideas, even as a young kid. And, we're going to talk a lot about children. And, this is the big thing I think kids need to hang on to, and we need to really promote that, is dreams. We all grow up with dreams of being something. And for me, I had lots of dreams as a kid, but one of them was to be a pro snowboarder. If you know anything about Buffalo, New York, there's really not much here. It's not like the mecca for snowboarding. Sure, we get lots of snow, but we don't have mountains. So every time when I'd watch these videos and get all fired up, and you talked about that energy, I've always had that from, when I was a little kid all the way through today. And I just wanted it so bad. I watched my heroes, these professional snowboarders on these VHS tapes and in the magazines, and I just wanted that. And every single time somebody told me that wasn't possible, that I'd have to move, it just fueled the fire. And I'll never forget, growing up, when I was a kid in high school, I didn't have the money or the resources to go to the resorts or travel around and ride the really good stuff like these other pros did. But what I had is not far from where I went to school and not too far from home, was a country club. And this country club, I didn't belong, but it was built in a ravine. And the ravine had sand traps going down each side. So what I figured out is I said, all right, well, I can go there and I can build a jump out of the sand trap. It would have a natural landing because it was in a ravine, and I could practice all these tricks, and it was free. So my mom would drop me off after school. Now you got to remember, school lets out let's just say we got there at 3. I had till 5 until it started getting dark, until mom was going to pick me up. So I had a 2-hour window to hit that stupid jump as many times as I could and practice every one of those tricks that I saw in those videos. And that's exactly what I did, to the point where literally I would go home because I get so tired. I'd go home, and at night I would run up and down our backyard in the snow to get in better shape so that I could make more laps and learn more tricks. So when people told me I couldn't do something, I simply said, I'm just going to do what everybody else is unwilling to do. And that's how I grew up. 16, it was still with that big dream, but I got a real job at a restaurant. And I hated it. They degraded me so badly. They made me think I was a failure completely. I couldn't do anything right. So the day I came in there and I quit was literally the day I quit trading hours for dollars. Came home and told my mom, I said, I quit. I thought she was going to be really upset. But then I followed that up. I said, but can I open a clothing line in the basement? So right then and there, just like that, I became an entrepreneur. So that entrepreneurship started with a dozen t-shirts that I printed at my art teacher, Mr. Mahalski's shop. And I sold them out of my backpack, and then 2 dozen, then 3 dozen, then hats. And that's how it began. I became an entrepreneur without knowing I was an entrepreneur. I was just doing what I needed to do to fuel that desire to be a pro snowboarder, because I had to get gas to go to the hill and snowboard and buy tickets and boards and all that. And that's how I funded it. I started getting the next big dream at 17 when I saw all these shop owners where I was selling my clothing living what I wanted. They had the shop and they were living my dream of, snowboarding every day. So I came home and started that journey, and very quickly realized, remember you mentioned earlier, it's never about your actual resources, it's about how resourceful you can be. Well, I didn't know that then. And it was about my resources. I needed 70 grand. 17 years old, punk snowboard kid, needed 70 grand. Nobody that I asked for money even remotely said, you can do this, you've got this. They all said, that's stupid. Why are you doing this? My father invited me to get a job at the factory where he worked. My mother watched this and saw this whole thing unraveling. And then she did something what I think is really stupid looking back. But at the time, it was kind of the only alternative. She put the house, the 2-bedroom, 700 square foot house I grew up in, on the line so that her punk snowboard kid could chase his dream.
Wow.
And that's how I entered that store, Fat Man Board Shops, which are still open today. I sold them off in 2010. But
did you end up snowboarding?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I had a very long professional snowboarding career with lots of broken bones and injuries that plagued that whole thing. But yeah, I rode professionally all the way up into my 30s until I had a bad accident out actually at, where was that? Mammoth in California on a photo shoot with 32 boots. And I overshot one of the jumps, and that was it, man. It was just, my body just pretty much disintegrated when I landed. I tried filming my last video part. I tried competing, and my body just said, no, Chris, you are done. So yeah, the snowboarding career definitely happened, and it happened in conjunction with my stores. So my stores were a lifestyle business, that's
right.
That's awesome. I'm in the midst of kind of rewriting. I won't publish it obviously, but just for my kids, kind of rewriting Think and Grow Rich.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Which is essentially what you were doing. You didn't know that.
I had no idea, but it was exactly what I was doing.
But that's the process you were going through, right? And so my kids are young, right? My oldest is 14. And so I kind of felt like to myself, if they read this right now, they're not going to totally get it. But if I rewrite it and like to its basics, wouldn't that be an awesome gift to give a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old? But anyway, so I love that story because too often I think we're scared to like tell our kids, go for it. What's the biggest dream? We had one person say, what's your ideal on the podcast? Go for your ideal. And I think too often that doesn't happen. So can I ask, before we get to the finance thing, can I ask you, your mom sounds like she's freaking awesome, by the way, but did that passion just something that you had? Because some people just have that passion. Or do you think that something fueled that passion and this idea of goals? And like, where did that come from?
Oh my goodness. That's a good question. My mom probably is where a lot of it came from, because she was very, we had no money, barely could keep that house over our head. And I remember she would always save money. She had this giant glass, like, I don't know what it was, but just this big glass thing in her closet. And she put her quarters in. I remember when she wanted this lawnmower, because our old lawnmower was falling apart, she would like put all the spare change in that thing until it filled up. And she knew when it was full, she'd have enough to buy that. Well, she instilled that same thing in me. Before the snowboard, well, actually during the snowboarding, I wanted a dirt bike. I always had used beat up mini bikes, and I wanted a dirt bike. So I said to my mom, I said, how do I save for a dirt bike? And she taught me the same thing. I still have it today. It's a little black box, wooden box, the top slides back. And I started working at a farm at 14, and I would come home with the money from the farm, the gas and everything I put in the 4-wheeler to get there. And I gave her the difference. And I just kept doing this. Then I got a summer job cleaning up at this Wide Waters restaurant and gave her the money. And I'll never forget the one day she said, Chris, let's go to Hebler's, which was a dirt bike shop, and look at dirt bikes. And I said, okay, Mom, but I just went, and I had no idea I'd saved enough money. But I got there, I test drove a KX and a YZ, and I was like, I love the KX. And she said, well, what if you could have that right now? I had saved enough money not knowing I had. And, back to that dreaming thing in your children, the one thing with that book, Think and Grow Rich, I had no idea I was doing this, but the one thing I always did as a child, and this is very important. So don't leave this out. I was visual. Everything I wanted, whether it was a skateboard, a BMX, a dirt bike, I would draw it. And my mom would always bring me home, from the grocery store, a magazine, BMX Plus or Dirt Wheels or something. And I would so intently get into that magazine, and I would envision myself on that dirt bike or on that skateboard or on that BMX, and I would draw it. And all my Trapper Keepers at school, you guys remember those, right?
Oh, yeah.
I would draw all over them. And I would just draw pictures of me on a skateboard, me on a dirt bike. So it was so real to me. And, I've practiced this my whole life, and I don't talk about it enough, but it was so real to me at that time because I envisioned it so much, and I drew it so much, and I thought about it so much that it was inevitable for those things it had to happen. It's a universal law. But back then it was just that's all I had. And my mother always told me, when you want something, draw it on paper. That's just what she said. She just draw it.
That's very cool.
And that's how I did it, guys. I mean, there's no real secrets. It's not like I got lucky ever. I just literally never gave up, and I never lost sight of that dream. So, we'll get into, I know a lot more with kids, after I kind of get over this whole, how do I get into the money thing from a punk snowboard kid? But
all of these things are things we got to teach our kids. We've got to teach them that they can think big. We've got to teach them that they can achieve their dreams. I mean, I'm thinking about all of these things, and your mom and my mom were very, very similar, Chris. We had the Disneyland bottle in the corner. That's where all of the spare change went. When you broke $1, you came home and emptied your pockets at the end of the day. And when that thing was full, we got to go to Disneyland. Right? We've done that twice. She and my dad took the whole family, extended family, with spare change about 3 years ago. And then mine was a go-kart, mine was a go-kart instead of a dirt bike, but it was the one in the back of Boy's Life, and I looked every single time I got a Boy's Life magazine. I turned to the very back first and I saw my go-kart. Right. And when that thing was delivered to the house, it was just, that's the best day in the world for a kid. So, and, those are the best memories. So I would say, the thing that I'm taking out of this, Chris, and that I'm drawing out of my own experience and yours together would be find out what your kids' dreams are and then support them no matter what. Mm-hmm. No matter how big and crazy that dream might sound, just tell your kids, hey, I believe in you. And my mom said, hey, I'll go partners with you and we'll buy that thing together. You earn half, I'll earn half. And I earned my half before she did. And she tells me now, I had no idea how I was going to pay for the other half of this go-kart because I went out and did the same thing. I started pet sitting and house sitting for the neighbors, and I made flyers and became a little entrepreneur in the neighborhood. And it was because my mom said, we can do that. Let's do it.
That's awesome. And that is so similar. And, I didn't get into all the details, but I used to clean windows. My grandparents lived in a trailer park. And I would go there. I spent a lot of time as a child there, and I would go there, and my grandma also would say, well, go ask them if they want their windows cleaned. So I was a salesman at probably 6 years old. I'm going around with a bucket that my grandma gave me, a squeegee and a thing, and I was cleaning people's windows. And the best part about it is, today a lot of people would look at that and be like, oh, that sucks. Oh, that's a lot of work. And back then, man, I had so much fun doing it. I had so much fun because I knew that was what was necessary to get the things that I wanted. And the things were so simple. I mean, gosh, back then, $20, $50 was almost an unachievable amount of money. If I wanted a new set of rims for my mags, actually back then, for my BMX bike, I can't remember how much they were, probably $80. That was just an insurmountable amount of money. But my grandmother and my mother always taught me how to break that down into those little steps. And if you clean this many windows, or you mow this many lawns, or you go clean the pig's pens. I just kept saving that money, and I got the mags, I got the BMX, I had the skateboard. And it wasn't because mom and dad bought it for me. The biggest thing I remember the biggest purchase my mom ever bought for me was my very first snowboard, a Look Burt Lamar used. It was definitely used. I think it was $180. And I remember she got that, and I'm just like, Mom, how did you afford this? And but that's just what she did, and that's just what she instilled in me. I knew no different. And the biggest thing, like when I was a kid, like I never had anybody outside of maybe my dad, but he was not really in the picture then, telling me that these things that I was dreaming and these ideas that I had, pro snowboarder, heck, I wanted to be a pro BMX rider, all of it. Nobody ever said you can't do that. Nobody ever was like, oh, that's stupid. You're going to have to. That's fun now while you're a child, but when you grow up, you're not going to be able to do those things. You're going to have to earn a living. That was never the case. It was just go out there. Oh, you want a BMX track in the backyard? Well, grab a shovel. You want a pond in the backyard? Well, grab a shovel. I mean, that's just how it was, literally. And that's just everything I did. And I think sometimes as a child, like we don't realize how much is pre-programmed in our mind. I know this now. I have a 14-month-old, and the things we learn as a child, the one thing a child doesn't have that we do is limitations. If a child dreams that they want to go to the moon, well, in their mind, they literally are going to the moon. There's nothing saying that they can't. There's no barriers. There's no conformity. There's no one saying, well, that's great, but it's just, yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Do it. And that's the greatest gift we have as children. And it is stripped from too many kids way too early, when they get kicked down and beat down. And, that happened for me a little later, I think, because I did live in the town. I wasn't in an urban area where I kind of was influenced by a lot. I sort of was at home and had my BMX track, my skateboard ramps, and that's just what I did. So creativity was always something that's just what I did. I created things. I think that's the biggest thing that we are losing as a society. And you go to Think and Grow Rich, he talks about that, is conformity versus creation. Why is it that statistically, by Social Security Administration's numbers, if you took 100 20-year-olds and you asked them all if they're going to be successful, the answer is absolutely. Of course they're going to be. But at 65 years old, that isn't the case. Only 5 of those 120-year-olds are actually financially secure. Only 1 of them is wealthy. So how can that be that 95 of them, they're not financially secure? They're living off somebody else? Absolutely. Why? 95 of them decided to conform to what other people's ideologies told them they should do. Only 5 of them created their financial destiny in one capacity or the other. That is the difference between success and failure in my observation of everything I've seen. I had these stores. I was living my perfect day every day. I was going to my shops, working, I was snowboarding, I was doing it. And then the planes hit the tower in the 2000s, and the dot-com crash hit. And I realized what a recession was. I had no idea. I'd never seen one of these things before. Realized my business was tanking, and I couldn't afford just basic essentials and my car payment. So I had to get a job. And I remember my best friend Mike worked at Little Caesars. And I said, Mike, are they hiring at Little Caesars? I went there for an interview. They were not hiring pizza drivers. Kid you not. So I put my resume out, and the only thing on my resume was self-employed, right? That's the only thing I had. So the only people that responded back to me were Wall Street firms I guess they know something about what makes a good advisor. And I ended up interviewing. I ended up jumping into that thinking this is a part-time thing. I'm going to be this financial advisor just till I can get back on my feet to go back to my perfect world. And I loved it. And I actually did very well my first year. I made $74,000, which is more money than I'd ever made in any capacity. And then the next year I made over 100, and it just went up from there. So I'm this young 20-year-old in this Wall Street world. And I kind of figured it out when I got into the money game. I wasn't the smartest kid. I didn't, have a bunch of college. I didn't have a high IQ. I had the ability to dream and outwork other people. So I saw in the outside of the firm that I was at, there was all these big time advisors, guys making, $500 to $1 million. They all had the big offices. And I watched them. Every day, they'd get there at 9. Every day, they'd leave at 4, maybe 5 o'clock on the occasional day. And usually for lunch, they left for 2 hours. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, if that's what they're doing, if I want to get one of those offices, I want to be one of them, all I need to do is what they're unwilling to do. So I started getting there at 7 in the morning. I worked through lunch. I'd pack up some mulberries from the mulberry tree, and that was my lunch. And then I'd work till 7 o'clock at night. And I started figuring it out. Like, people answered their phones after 5 o'clock. I mean, come on, you should have known this, but I didn't. That's not what they trained us. People got home at 5:30, and they answered their phones till 7, maybe 8 o'clock. So I made all my appointments at night. And then what I started doing is coming in early, doing all my prep work and doing my afternoons for all the appointments. And I very quickly became one of the top 3 advisors in that firm all the way up to 2008. So that's how I got into the traditional money game.
Let's talk to the teenagers out there a little bit. Maybe give them some advice on financial planning. Because you know as well as I do that basically right through college, unless you go into finance or accounting, money management is not taught unless your parents teach you or something, right? So sit down with yourself at 16, 17 and talk to those teenagers about some of the things that you would want them to know, or what that you'd like your 14-year-old to know as she's entering her teenage years and getting ready to see the world.
There's a lot of problems out there, and you nailed a couple. They do not teach money. They don't teach budgeting. They don't even teach the truth about how money works. What they teach us from a very young age, straight through the highest level of college, is how to be a good employee, how to go trade hours for dollars and be good in a profession. And I'm not saying there's not merit to that, and I'm not saying there's not a need for that, but they miss the money piece. And people often are like, oh, well, I wonder why. Because they don't want you to know. Even as a financial advisor, I was 16 years at a very high level. Like when I retired and sold my practice in 2018, I was way up there. I mean, I was managing large institutional portfolios, predicting market trends, but none of that matters. The one thing I will tell you is even at that high level, there was so much that I didn't understand about money. I only understood what they wanted me to understand. And now how I've learned what I've learned is by following the wealthy around, by following multimillionaires and billionaires around and asking them the same questions, but asking them, how did you get where you're at? What do you do with money? And most people are scared to talk about money. So 14-year-old, what is the first things I would tell a teenager? Well, teenagers, they have their own agenda. I know I did back then. They want things, right? Maybe they want the snowboard. Maybe they want that new car. Whatever it is, you got to talk their language. Don't sit there and try to talk to them about, oh, you got to start buying stocks. They don't give a crap about stocks. Like the only reason they even know what a stock is because the parents talk to them about it. They want what the stock does. They want what money does. They don't care about money. The first thing kids need to understand is that money is okay to talk about. It is not evil. It is nothing different than the tool in dad's shed that digs that hole when we want to plant a flower. And if we teach children that money is just a tool, can be shaped and molded and done, you can use it for anything we want, then the next step is to take back control of that tool. Because the biggest problem in society that I see when it comes to money is that we are literally taught to give up control of all the money. We go out and we're taught, like I said, to earn money. So if I'm talking to a teenager, the first thing that they're taught is to go work for this, right? How many hours do I got to trade to make this $100? Is it 1? Is it 10? Different for everybody. But we've been taught to work in exchange for the money. Then when we make the money, what are we taught to do? Go spend it. We're just taught to go out there and spend the money we make. And now, for those of you listening, I'm holding a $100 bill and I just threw it because what are we taught to do? We're taught to make it and go out and give it to somebody else, trade it to somebody else, exchange it to somebody else for the things that we want. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is we're never actually in control of the money. We are only giving up control the entire time. We're putting money in the bank. And who's in control when we put it at the bank? It's not us. It's the bank. When we put it in our 401ks, when we get a big boy or a big girl job at, that career, we give our money to the 401k where it sits for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Like these are the problems. Because if we're not in control of the money, somebody else is. And when somebody else is in control of your money, your tool, you are not, and you can't make that money work for you. So here's what the wealthy do different. And this is what I tell everybody. Your money, your tool has to be working for you all the time because you can only work so hard. So you can go out and you can trade 40, 50, 60, 100 hours a week for only so long. And you can only make so much because there's a cap to hours for dollars. But there's no cap at all. And this is what the wealthy know to how hard this money can work for you. But you will never understand how hard your money can work for you if all you do is keep giving up control. Keep being taught that when you make it, you just spend it. When you make more, you go spend more. That there's so much more to it. We need to literally become more rigid. We need to understand that when we make money, a certain percentage of that money needs to be put in our bank. And for kids, the biggest thing I want them to understand, and I'm teaching my daughter right now, is how to be their own bank. So if banks are the creators of the modern financial systems. Okay. You might say Wall Street is, but banks really are. Banking 101. That's what kids need to understand. They need to understand that we work for money, we make it, and then we have to move that money. That's all banks do. They don't leave money sit. We have to move this money. And the easiest way to do it is teach banking. And banking is nothing more than you take this dollar and you move this dollar over to this hand. So I'm going in a circle, left hand to right hand. And when it moves over to this hand, what am I going to do with it? I'm going to make that money go work. Well, some people are like, well, I want to buy something. Great. You want to buy a car? Well, save enough in the left side when it's in your bank, then take it out and then go buy the car. But don't stop there, because that's not banking. Banking requires the bottom part of the circle. This money that you move to the right side to exchange for goods and services or invest then needs to make its way back over to the left hand where it started. It's called recycling and recapturing the money that you're giving away. If you're the bank, you control all aspects of what your money does and how it works for you. Okay, take the money you've saved, go buy a car. Most people stop there. It's the worst thing you can possibly do with money is buy a car. It's a depreciating asset. But a car can be one of the greatest things if you just do what you would have done to the bank. You would have normally financed the car or leased the car and made monthly payments to the dealership. Well, take that same monthly payment you would have paid to the dealership and then pay that back to your bank. Take the exact dollar amount that the dealership would have charged monthly, and then instead of paying the dealership or the finance company, pay your bank. And what you've now done is you've now recaptured all the wealth that everybody else gives away. It doesn't take very long, a couple short few years, to start building a sizable amount of wealth if you practice banking and you treat your money the same as you would treat the bank's money. So now let's take all of that and let's bring that to a 14-year-old. What does a 14-year-old want? They might want a new cell phone. Great. You want this new cell phone. Well, what do you got to do to get this? Well, I gotta save up enough money. Well, how much is a cell phone today? Aren't they over like $1,000 now?
$1,000, yeah.
Like $1,000.
$1,000. So you teach your children to save up $1,000 through various tasks. Heck, pay them an allowance, but make them work for the allowance. Don't just give them the allowance. Make them actually understand the value of doing something in exchange for that, because you got to get that out of the way. But then teach them that we're going to go pay for this phone. Okay, so they take the $1,000 that they've saved up, and I'll just grab some more cash here. Take the $1,000 they've saved up, and now what we do is we exchange it to the cell phone place, and now we've got the cell phone. Great, now the kid's happy, right? The 14-year-old's got their new gadget, but it can't stop there. Now what you need to teach them is normally you would have financed that phone, or dad and mom would have financed that phone, even at 0%, but we would have made a $50 or $60 monthly payment on our phone bill. So what we're going to do is we're going to take $50 from you, from your allowance or from wherever you're making money babysitting, and we're going to take that $50 and we're going to put it back into your bank where it will be there for the next item you want to buy. But then what you got to teach them to do is you got to teach them that even though you're doing that, their money, they should always pay themselves back with interest. They'd pay the bank with interest. They'd pay everybody else with interest except for themselves. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take that and we're going to say, all right, well, we would have paid Apple 5% interest on that loan. We're going to pay ourselves back with 5% interest. So you just teach them simple banking strategies. It doesn't matter if it's for a car, a cell phone, a dirt bike, anything they want. If you teach them that basic fundamentals and how to always be in control of their money. Notice the money never left my family or my child's bank because it left the bank, went to buy the good, and then it came back into the bank over time. So it was always replenishing itself. That is so simple, right? There's nothing difficult about that. But yet nobody talks about that. Nobody teaches that. There's not a financial advisor that you will ever meet or find that will teach you what I just showed you, simply because they can't make any money on it. Banks can't make money teaching you that. Wall Street can't make money teaching you that. That you could go so far with just that simple thing. If they understand that that's the tool to get the things they want, but then they understand when they get the things they want, it doesn't end there. They have to then replenish their bank to buy the next thing that they want. And if they just keep doing that and you just teach them that, man, where would they be? Where would we be if we were taught that? But we weren't. We were taught to give up control just like our parents did, just like our grandparents did.
We wouldn't have as many people in financial crisis in their 60s. That's for sure.
No, you're absolutely correct. There's a lot of things that would be very different. But unfortunately, that sounds great, but there's a very small percentage of the people out there that will ever do that because their mindset's not right.
Yeah.
And whether it's my children or your children, that's what we need to help them with is the mindset, the inability to ever give up on their dreams. And then when they have a dream usually has to use some resources eventually, teach them how to be the bank and use their own resources to get that.
That's good stuff. Chris, I want to get inside your head as a new dad. What are some of the things that you're learning right now with a 14-month-old? And maybe in the last 14 months, what have you learned? And if you could go back and tell yourself 14 months ago what those things are, what would they be?
I think the first thing that, I tried preparing myself for by reading books that I couldn't prepare myself for is the fact that, when you have a child, everything that you thought you worked for, everything you thought you lived your life for goes out the door. And you all of a sudden have a new meaning, a new perception on why you do every single thing. And I find myself, some days now, as she's getting a little older, and I'll tell you some of the things I've learned there is I find myself trying to work way smarter and condense my time when I'm working to do only things that really matter. I'm learning to say no to more versus saying yes. I'm saying no to a lot of things, but yes to the right things. So that single-handedly, the only thing I'm trying to do is make sure that there's time every day for me to get home and see my daughter, even if it's a half hour or an hour before she goes down. We call it milkies and then bedtime, but that's at 6:30. Prior to Vivi, I never made it home before 8 o'clock. It was almost impossible for me to get done working a lot with West Coast and actually other time zones. So the other thing too that I've realized, and I'd say this is probably from when she turned 11 months old to now she's 14, is I never gave children or infants or babies, whatever you want to call it, the credit they deserve for how freaking smart they are and how fast they learn it. Every single day, she's picking something up that literally the smartest man or smartest woman that I know couldn't pick up. Not even if it was thrown in front of them, they wouldn't figure it out. But the child, without me telling her anything, without me showing her, is watching, observing, and learning. And that to me is, I think, one of the most unbelievable things that I'm realizing is just their ability to learn in a way that we have forgotten how to learn. And I'm fascinated by it. And I'm trying to pay really close attention, because if that's the lost art that we've lost, we need to get back there, because what are we leaving on the table that our children know and we don't?
Yeah, they're fascinating at that. I mean, my favorite ages are about 2 years to 5 years old, because they're just soaking it up, just like you're talking about. And they're learning so rapidly. And one of the things I'll say, some of the best advice I ever got, even though it's super simple, is to keep a journal like on the kitchen table or something for all the crazy stuff they say. Because you've got some fantastic years ahead of you, like some of the best years, kids that are completely innocent and nearly all the time fun, other than changing diapers and crying once in a while, but they're like damn near perfect, right? For the next 3 or 4 years. And one of the best thing is just journaling, like little things they do and little sayings they have. And you go back on that. You think you'll remember, but you won't.
You won't.
So you go back on that when they're, 10 or 20. And those are going to be precious little gifts, nuggets of things they did.
And there's something, that happened just today. This happened more than once, but today it hit me, and I just stopped and paused and realized that I get up really early. A lot of times I'm out before they're even up and going around, but today they were up, and I went to get coffee for Larissa, and I come back, and a lot of times she'll just come out and grab it. But today I took it and I brought it in and I handed it to her, and I looked down and Vivi's right there, and I just picked her up and I just held her above me, and I just looked in her eyes, and I kind of just put her, against my chest. And she gave me the most incredible hug, like a hug that no adult's ever given me, that no one's ever given me. Just a hug where she put her head sideways on my shoulder and just squeezed me. And it just stayed like that for, it felt like an hour. It was probably seconds, but to me, it felt like an hour. And that set the stage for my entire freaking day. One hug, man. One hug set my entire day up for success.
I'm completely jealous of where you are right now. I would go back in 2 seconds and have all my kids are 15, 12, and 8. Man, everyone tells you this, and everyone told me this, and I tried to hold on with everything I could, and I think it helped, but it's going to go by so fast. And those hugs are going to turn into the greatest conversations you ever had. And then the greatest conversations are going to turn into them doing sports and you being so proud. But at some point also it's going to turn into, they don't get excited when you come home and they want to hang out with their friends instead of you. And it just goes by so fast. So to you and the listeners, right? Hold on to every stinking moment. And everyone says that. And no matter how hard you hold on, you'll wish you held on harder to the moment, to the time, all those kind of things. And you'll find yourself continuing to make your money work for you so you can spend more time with your little girl.
Yeah. It almost sounds cliche, right? Like,
it does.
Hold on to it because it goes by so fast. And I remember telling my youngest, would you quit growing up on me? And she's like, I'm trying, Daddy, I'm trying, but I just, every day I wake up and I'm bigger, and the cutest memories that I have. And I'm going to give the audience a nugget that I learned from somebody, and it became a daily doodad. But one of the things was, when you give your kid a hug, be the last one to let go, because you don't know how long they need that hug, right? Sometimes we give them a hug and we're like, hey, how was your day? And let's start talking. I did that once with one of my twins, and I think he was about 10 or 11. We were standing in the garage. He got out of the car and I gave him a hug when he got home from school, and he held on for like 2 solid minutes. And that's what he needed. He didn't need to talk to me. He didn't need anything else. He just needed to stand there and hug me. And I let him, this was right after somebody told me to do this, I let him be the one to disengage the hug. And I had no idea that he needed that. None. No idea at all. And so try that one out.
Yeah, that's great advice. That I can relate, because today I wouldn't have let go. She let go because Mommy came down the hallway. And, at this age, Mom's clearly the reigning champion. I'm there to play, and, that's about it. But I don't have the necessary things that Vivi needs today. But that will change.
That will change, and it does change. Are there certain things that you've thought of that you say, oh, man, I just want to give this gift to my daughter, right? Are there certain things where you say, like, my mom taught me this, I want to make sure I teach her. No one taught me this, I want to make sure I teach her these. Are there some core principles or lessons learned that you say, man, I want to make sure that my daughter gets this? Have you ever thought about that?
I haven't, no, which is why it's such a great question, because it's not about, the answer really doesn't matter. It's the question that matters. And that's a good one. Some of the things my mom taught me, growing up, just the simple-minded mother that she was, so it was always about love. And, she always made sure that, we prayed every morning, and just little things like that are things I want to make sure that she gets. And the other thing I think that I wasn't taught, and I will make sure that my daughter is taught this the second she can comprehend what this means, is the power of giving. You hear people say, oh, well, I'll start donating, or I'll start giving to this charity when this, or when I make that. You'll never do it. You'll never do it. You start when you have nothing. And I will tell you, I didn't. And I wasn't taught this. It was, we barely had enough money growing up to make these things. So giving was always, it wasn't just money, but it was, we gave, time and things like that. But I think the number one thing I missed for a lot of my early years, all those years when I was an advisor, I had a big ego. Good luck finding a financial advisor that doesn't have an ego. It's almost like built into them when they go through their whole training. And the ego kept me from understanding the importance of giving, because for most of those years, and I didn't get into my failures, but all those success that you heard me talk to in 2008, well, early 2000s it ended, 2008 it ended, in 2014 it ended really bad. I rode the most crazy roller coaster of just success and failure. And I relate a lot of that back to the fact that I was living with an ego, and I was also living in a world where everything was me, me, me. I was going to make money because I wanted this. I wanted a new, bigger house. I wanted a new car. It was always me, right? If I do this, I make this, I can have that. Somewhere after 2014, after we met at Secret Knock, Greg actually had told me at one of his masterminds, he put his hand on my shoulder and he gave me the best advice he ever could. He said, give your best stuff away for free. I had no concept of understanding that at the time. I was in a very low point in my life. But what he told me was probably one of the most important things anyone could have ever told me. I just needed to wrap my head around and understand. Today, everything that I do, and I do very well, I give it away for free. As much stuff as I can, I give everything away for free. The funniest thing is the more I give, the more money I donate, the more things I do for free, the more times that someone say, hey, would you do this? I mean, how much would you charge? I'll do it for free. You know, and again, I do say no to a lot of them, but every time I do that, I never go into it thinking, well, if I do this, I get that. Or if I do this, somebody will call me because of that. The second I started doing that, literally almost instantaneously, I started seeing success in ways that I never even dreamt success. I mean, it started with, you know, you do something nice and then all of a sudden you get a front row parking spot at the shopping center. Or, you know, you do something nice and then all of a sudden you land a big case that you weren't even thinking you were to get. Or someone calls you after a year that you thought was gone and they're like, hey, remember we had that conversation? I'd love to do this. All these little things pop up. But if you go into giving with the anticipation of I'm going to give this because I'm going to get that, your life will continue to spiral downward. And I think that's the number one thing that I want, whether it's with my daughter, my family, or all the people that I get a chance to teach. I think that's the one thing I want to, you know, and my final graduation day I want to be remembered for is that guy gave as much as he could give, because that right there is the reason why I've had the success I have. And no one can tell me it's for any other reason. Oh, you're super smart. You're America's #1 money mentor. Man, it's just because I give. That's why.
We always end the podcast by asking our guest what they think it means to be a gentleman. And what you just described as somebody who gives for the sake of giving because it's the right thing to do, and it grows their heart as well as the person who gets it, I think is got to be part of your definition. But if you were to answer that question in short form, how would you answer the question of what does it mean to you to be a gentleman?
Going into all situations with love as your first reason you're doing things. Maybe it's a please or a thank you. Like, you know, I love going down south because, you know, that love is evident with the please and thank yous everywhere. And their children, you know, constantly say please and thank you. So being a gentleman, I think it's just a way of saying that you love them without saying I love you, by saying please, thank you, pardon me, and just being just an all-around good person.
That's a great answer. It's a simple answer, but it's a great one. We haven't had that one before. Just go forth with love in your heart.
If you treat everyone with love and respect, and then you focus on giving, you're going to be a very happy individual, because I think those are the things that true happiness comes from, right? Long-term happiness. A lot of the world's trying to find the short-term happiness, but the long-term happiness comes from being selfless and loving others. That's where true happiness comes from. So, words of wisdom. Thank you so much, Chris. Thanks for being with us.
You're welcome. And I think the world is trying, you know, every way it can to strip that from us. But sometimes we just need to see past that and realize that we do it from a place that they don't understand. And, you know, whatever religion somebody is, just always remember, you know, in those final moments, he says they don't know what they're doing. And we have to understand that right now there's a lot of people out there that they don't know what they're doing. They don't know why they're doing it. And we have to actually lead with, you know, I created a shirt that says haters need hugs too. For that very reason, you lead with love. I mean, even in the moments where you hate, lead with love. In the moments where people are attacking you, always come back and just use love. I mean, even in a nice way, but just try that and see how long can evil and hatred survive when all you do is answer back with love. I will tell you, being somebody that has a large social presence, not very long, maybe two more comments. And then they're just like, this person's an idiot, because I led with love. But if you keep feeding in with hatred and, you know, whatever you want to call it, evil or any of that, it'll just keep on perpetuating and growing and growing and growing.
Love is a life secret weapon.
My takeaway today, Chris, from everything that you've said is we've got the power to influence our kids, no matter how young or old they are, to lead with love, to dream big, and to never leave their side. Thanks for the inspiration today. We hope that the inspiration was felt by those who listen to the podcast. If somebody wants to connect with you, see what you're doing, you can go to Chris's website. Is that the best place, Chris?
Absolutely. Just chrisnaugle.com. Like I said, I give everything away for free. So books and everything, just grab whatever you need.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today, Chris, and thank you for listening to the podcast, everybody. If you haven't subscribed, please hop over to your favorite podcast platform and subscribe so that you can get these downloaded every Monday morning to give you a dose of inspiration for the week ahead. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore.
Make it a great day.